Hi, this is Juan, and before we begin our first episode of our new series, Side Dish, I want to let you all know that this episode will be uploaded in two parts to give me more time to edit. This first half will cover Kanye's albums from College Dropout to 808s and Heartbreak, and then the second half will start with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and go all the way up to Jesus is King. Also, in our next episode of Hungry Hip Hop, we will be reviewing our first classic album with Lupe Fiasco's Food and Liquor, per Milo's recommendation. So be on the lookout for the second part of our Kanye side dish and for our Food and Liquor review in the next week or so. Now here's Alan with the intro.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Side Dish. I'm Alan, and to give you a little background on what we're going to be doing today, and actually every time moving forward on The Side Dish, is we're going to look at an artist who has multiple albums out and kind of talk about their career as a whole, what we think about them, what others have been thinking about them, and where we personally would start jumping in if we were new. Today, we're going to be looking at Kanye West, a man who probably needs no introduction. If you found this podcast, you know who Kanye West is. From Chicago, started with his first album 2004 with The College Dropout, and released his last full album last year with Jesus is King, and has 7 solo efforts between those two albums, and a myriad of compilations and projects with other artists. But today we're just going to be focusing on his solo effort. I myself am a very, very big Kanye fan. And without any further ado, let's just jump right in.
Sure, I'll do it. Okay, so we're going to start off with College Dropout, Kanye's first album, dropped in 2004. By this time, he had been signed to Jay-Z. He had really made a name for himself as a producer, producing for a lot of artists, where he began to really hone his sound that he would approach his first few albums with. As a debut album, it introduced Kanye as this kind of everyman, and that was kind of what made him stand out at first.
Yeah.
So he had songs like Jesus Walks, where he talked about his faith. He had songs like Spaceship, which describe his struggle as the average Joe working at the Gap, experiencing racism, things like that. And yeah, the album kind of encompasses a lot of different parts of his life as this up-and-coming artist.
Yeah, to start us off, what do you guys think of Jesus Walks and the legacy that song has, going from the first song I heard by Kanye all the way 16 years later? Now he's a Christian rapper. Milo, what did you think of Jesus Walks in 2020?
I think it's ironic. Hello, this is Milo, live and in stereo. And I'm often reminded of, there was a line, I believe it was in Yeezus, where he said, "I can't go to hell, I made Jesus Walks."
That was on Otis off Watch the
I
Throne.
was off Watch the Throne.
I definitely recognize that line, but yeah.
So I still love the song. It's a song I turn to when I'm in a rough situation or going through something. But thinking of who it came from, it strikes me as really ironic.
That was probably the first song I heard by Kanye. Like, I'm not 100% sure, but growing up, I remember hearing it in elementary school and whatnot. So I would assume that was, and that if I'm correct, that is the biggest single from the album, right?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, pretty sure that was the first song when I heard it. I remember there was a lot a lot of debate on whether what he was doing was okay, especially in Christian circles or whatever. But I do remember that song being huge. Real quick, so I'm looking at this album on Wikipedia, and it says first week sales were almost 500,000, 441,000. And this is a debut album, so that's why I'm very confused.
Yes.
Was he doing features before this or whatever? Or
I know he produced for John Legend. So the song
he signed John Legend.
What is it called?
Ordinary People.
What is that, baby? When I used to love you.
And he also was producing for Common as well. And Common, way back in the day, was actually pretty big, especially in the music scene of Chicago. And then also once you're on Rockefeller Records too, Jay-Z's label, you're going to be selling if you're early 2000s and you're working with Jay-Z. That's huge.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You've got Jay-Z features like Mos Def, lots of big name artists. Ludacris were on the album, so I think there was a lot of star power on the album, and that also
wasn't
helped.
A ton of music that came all the time like there is now. So okay, I guess it's comparing, keeping it in its context, it's not that wild. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's still pretty wild.
It's amazing for sure.
For a debut album to sell 500,000 and you don't have music before that, that's pretty wild. Yeah, I like for me. So I know everyone kept saying because Mark here. I'm by far the biggest Kanye hater. I will admit it. I could care less about him. And people always used to tell me like, "Oh, you got to go back and listen to like old Kanye. Like it's a lot different." I was like, "Yeah, whatever." Because I really started recognizing Kanye when like all the antics started coming out. Like the Taylor Swift thing was like the first time I actually like it was like in my view or whatever. And then it was just a bunch of like weak antics and music that I could just care less about. And everyone was like, go back to the early stuff, go to College Dropout. And I remember just a few months ago, first listening to College Dropout all the way through, and I was like, holy shit, this is a different person.
It's good. Yeah.
Like, I actually, when I was just going back right now and going, like, listing everything in order, College Dropout made it to my second. Like, it was a great album. Really good. Like, lots of, like, the songs overall were good. Like, all the lyrics had, like decent meaning and content. And yeah, no, I just, like, this was surprising. It was so surprising that I've heard Kanye, like, all, like, 808, Jesus, all the other stuff, and then go back and hear College Dropout. And it was just like, wow. I don't know how this is the same artist, really,
No, he totally keeps like reinventing himself. Yeah. For me, I do think this is one of his worst projects.
Oh,
I think I really like it. So I'm just genuinely a really big fan of Kanye, and this just doesn't compete, I think, with a lot of his later work. I think it's a great introduction. I think we start hearing a lot of what makes Kanye unique and what has kept him being unique. But I thought that it was kind of a little inconsistent. The standout tracks are, I think, amazing. Jesus Walks, Through the Wire, those singles. But then there's like Breathe In, Breathe Out, which I did not like. Or like New Workout Plan. Like, what is that?
We wouldn't have J. Cole if it wasn't for New Workout Plan.
Exactly.
Let's go.
I mean, that's the only reason to like it, is what J. Cole did with it.
Shout out Cole.
Yeah, listening to College Dropout was a lot like listening to Kendrick Lamar's Overly Dedicated. It was there was something there, but I don't think Kanye really settled into at least his identity then until Late Registration, and that's when it started to take off.
Oh, interesting. Milo, do you like Late Registration more than College Dropout?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, because that's just an opinion that I don't like hear a lot, but I really think that Late Registration is just incredible. One thing that that I actually do highlight on a lot of Kanye albums is the opening track. And on this, we get We Don't Care, which is one of the most, to me, just fun songs, which it's glorifying selling drugs. That is true. But I feel like it introduces the album in such just a way that if you can't go to college, this is how you're going to get some money. And we're going to have a bunch of young kids singing about selling drugs and just this really catchy tune. I thought the album starts out incredibly. So what did you guys think?
Yeah, I didn't see this glamorizing it. I saw that there was a lot of irony in him having a choir of children sing about drug dealing. And I thought that was kind of more the point, especially as he introduces himself as someone who's not like other rappers in that way. It felt like a kind of a very in-your-face way of showing his difference.
Okay.
And that way, I thought it was a great intro.
Juan, you mentioned that you didn't feel like this album was consistent. That's actually one of the reasons why I put it so high, is because when I listen to a lot of Kanye albums, there's just like there's albums that could have been great in my opinion because they had like amazing songs, but like just so much of the song, like he would hit like a really high, and then for like the next 4 songs just hit like an incredibly low, and then hit a really high again. Whereas I felt for College Dropout, I consistently felt like the songs were pretty decent, like in my opinion. Which is odd that like for you it was too inconsistent, and for me that's actually what put it so high, was how consistent.
And I mean, I think I agree with you. Generally, the problem with Kanye projects is consistency. Very high highs, and sometimes the lows are very low. And that, I think, what makes a Kanye project stand out is when it has less of that. I also, just to kind of be upfront, I have like a strong vendetta against skits. I never want to hear a skit on an album. I think it interrupts the flow of the music and just takes me out of it. And I delete them as soon as I download the album every time.
There's never been one skit you like?
Not that I can think of, no.
Wow. Okay.
And so this album contains a lot of skits. When we were discussing kind of how we're going to taken the albums, I thought it would only be fair to listen to them in their entirety and not in like my butchered version that takes out all the shit I don't like. Because I think if I took out those couple tracks and all the skits, it'd probably rank higher. But I think they really drag it down for me.
So listening back again, you didn't enjoy the skits at all?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
I can vibe with. They do interrupt. I didn't hate that when I listened. I thought "Broke by Broke" I think that's the skit from Late Registration. It was funny, and I think
that shit was hilarious.
I don't hate the skits, but if they weren't there, yeah, it would be a lot smoother of a ride. Instead of it does like break the flow of the album.
I'll also say I thought "School Spirit," even though this wasn't really his fault, it was like a lot of like sample clearance issues. But the censorship on that song made it unlistenable for me. The constant like DJ cutting that was done on his curse words. And generally, I don't think the song would have been that great without the censorship. But that's another track that I could have definitely done without.
What censorship? I'm sorry?
Sure. So that song, from what I understand, in order to get the song cleared, he couldn't have any like curse words on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he went back because the song had already been made. And he just like scratched all over any curse words that were found on it.
Okay.
One, I know exactly what you're talking about in School Spirit. It might be one of my weakest tracks from this album, in my opinion. Which I feel like it's a fine song. I think that should speak to how consistent this album is. But I do definitely acknowledge that it can be annoying, and I do generally skip that one, to be honest. So we have been on College Dropout for a little bit now. Do you guys want to go through our favorite tracks if you have one from this album? Because I definitely do, and it's All Falls Down.
All Falls Down, yeah. If I had to tier it, it would be Through the Wire at the bottom, and then Jesus Walks in the middle, and then All Falls Down at the top.
I would also probably say All Falls Down.
I'm going to say Jesus Walks, but All Falls Down is a close second.
Wow, I'm so happy you guys love All Falls Down too.
Jesus Walks is a close second for me.
Oh, that Lauryn Hill sample is just...
Oh, yeah, you know, girl.
Yeah.
With the Lauryn Hill on it, it's going to be a hit.
So, in general, before we move on to Late Registration, where would y'all say this album ranks total in your Kanye discography? How many solo albums does he have? Was it 8 or?
I have 10.
I'm counting 9. I'm counting 9.
I see 9.
Oh yeah, 9. Yes, I was right the first time.
My list of bad songs in Registration was so long that it went over another line, and that made me think there were 10.
Yeah, it's 9 albums. It's 9.
Okay.
For me, this was like 2. Like this ranked second.
Coming in at 5th place.
Okay.
7th place.
And for me, it is number 3.
All right, let's do Late Registration.
All right, Kanye's second album is Late Registration, which was released in 2005 and features, I would say the biggest single coming off this album is Gold Digger. As I'm sure you guys
100%. 100%.
Yeah. But back in the day, I used to hear Touch the Sky on the radio all the time. Time. I feel like that song has kind of fallen out of public favor recently for whatever reason, because I used to, back in the 2000s, I used to hear a lot, and they had a really crazy music video where Kanye was Evel Knievel with Pamela Anderson. Yeah. Mark, why don't you give us some quick thoughts on LR for us?
So I remember listening to this because I listened to all his discography in like a month. So I listened to this right after I did College Dropout for the first time. And I remember not liking it as much production-wise, which is why I don't rank it higher. But lyrically, I thought it was even stronger, if I remember correctly. Specifically the song Crack Music. I remember when that song came on, and I was like, holy shit, this is what he was meant to do. Like, this is what Kanye is meant to do. That song, so like that, and then Diamonds from Sierra Leone remix with Jay-Z, like those two songs for me were the ones that, like, if this was a more consistent album, I definitely would have ranked it higher than College Dropout, because I love those two songs more than really anything in his first 3 albums.
This is definitely my least favorite Kanye project.
Ooh.
As was referenced last week at the end of our podcast, this was the point of where Ellen and I had an argument when we first met. I thought it was a hilarious conversation. But what I really don't like about it is, once again, the inconsistency. I thought the album was way too long. And then I thought there was a huge chunk in the middle that just doesn't need to belong there. I'll say I agree with Mark that his lyricism is probably at its best on this album.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't think what makes Kanye great is his lyricism. And so that wasn't enough to like outshine the amazing production and features and music and everything else that makes a Kanye album great to me. So I thought Drive Slow, Crack Music, Bring Me Down, Addiction, and We Major were all tracks that could have been cut. I think Addiction is Kanye's worst song, period. I don't hear people talk about it, but I think the mixing is poor, it's awkward, it's way too long, and just it can be forgotten, I think.
You'd really cut out crack music?
I would. I agree with you.
I think strongest songs.
I agree with Mark on that.
I think it's musically boring.
And you're not a fan of Drive Slow, kind of one of the smaller singles from the album? Because I love Drive Slow. I love Paul Wall.
Yeah, I'm not a Paul Wall person.
Baby. Hey.
I like Drive Slow too.
That song was very slow.
It's called Drive Slow, dog.
I will say Late is one of the best songs on the album, but I thought like Cameron, Consequence both killed it. I thought Kanye's like extra verse at the end was amazing. That song definitely brings it up. I also thought it didn't need both versions of Diamonds from Sierra Leone. I don't know which one I would keep.
I thought that was weird.
Yeah.
I thought that was very weird that he had two versions of it.
Especially
like,
the remix not being the bonus track. Like that was
confusing. Like I was very confused by that when I first read it. I thought maybe it had like a weird version of it, but I was like, no, this is on Spotify. Like this is how it is.
Juan, I am glad that you mentioned Gone as one of the best songs on the album, because that is my favorite song from the album. And when I think of, there's a few songs when I think of Kanye really excelling as a rapper that I think of, and Gone and later in his career, we'll get to No More Parties in LA are two songs that really, I think, let him shine as like a rapper, not just producer rapper, but I could make it in this industry just with bars. And I feel like Gone needs to be appreciated more. So shout out to Gone.
Yes, agreed. For sure.
So you liked Gone then, Juan?
Yes, I loved it.
That's interesting.
One of his best songs on the album.
I thought that was the most boring song on the album. So honestly, I was just listening. So I was like, okay.
I was coming for me.
No, I'm not. I'm really not. It reminded me a lot of another song that everybody loved. Yeah, Otis. Everyone loved Otis. But that song also struck me as, I just wasn't digging the production on it. And then it felt like they were trying to rap like a New York style kind of cypher. And I'm like, it's not quite hitting just right.
It did feel cypherish.
I guess.
Well, don't think of Gold Digger being like the biggest single on this thing.
Oh, yeah. It was genius. Especially getting Jamie Foxx doing the vocals.
Like, I remember this being like on like trailers for movies. This was in the mall. Like, I remember this was huge. Like, everywhere was playing this song.
I think it's still his like best-selling single too.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I mean, football stadiums, like literally wherever, any type of thing, this song was always playing. Shout out to Jamie Foxx though.
Yeah, I think the song feels a little dated to me now, but at the time it was an amazing single and it was a brilliant choice to lead the album.
Interestingly enough, when I was a young man, I did not like this song. I at first I warmed up to it eventually, but at first I was like, this dude cannot rap. Like, what's going on here? But I love it now.
Still don't. I mean, for me, it's catchy as hell. Like, I could care less for the song. Like, it's just so incredibly catchy, though. Like, when you hear it, you can't help but, bob and, like, sing along to it. So, favorite songs for this, like I said, I mentioned Crack Music and Diamonds from Sierra.
Where do I begin? I mean, Heard 'Em Say, Touch the Sky, Gold Digger, Drive Slow, Bring Me Down. So the list goes on. The smorgasbord of
Gone and Diamonds from Sierra Leone. The original, I like slightly more.
Why do you always try to piss me off? I swear you do this on purpose.
I just don't like Jay-Z. And it was a good verse from him, but it was still Jay-Z.
I like Jay-Z, but that was a great verse, which is why I choose the remix.
I was actually impressed by Jay-Z. I'm not a big Jay-Z, but I was surprised by him on that one.
Alan, what are your two?
Okay, well, it's because you said I get two, then I'm going to pick two. One, I'm going to pick Gone, because I think Gone is the song where Kanye demonstrates his rapping ability more than, in my opinion, any other song he's ever put out. But I'm also going to pick Drive Slow, because it probably is the song that I listen to the most from this album. And it's the song that puts me in like a Like I feel like I'm in 2005 when I'm listening to this song. This is an
Mhm.
old school rap song from the 2000s, and I think it just works so well.
Milo, what were you two?
So I've had to be forced to choose like the two top. Golly, I would choose Heard 'Em Say and Drive Slow.
So for me, ranking, this was number 5 out of 9.
Yeah, I already said it, but for me it was last.
Oh, dang. This one was in 4th place, right above College Dropout.
Mark, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but I also have LR at 5. So
Damn. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey,
So
see, we got the same.
they're going to
we
be
got the same
different.
vibe with this.
We're going to start deviating
Yeah,
more
yeah.
after this for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We probably will. I like what deviate from the rest of you when it comes to this next one, but Kanye's next album, Graduation. What y'all think?
Giving the context for that, I think the biggest thing surrounding this album was the 50 Cent beef feud, whatever you want to call it, the
Yeah.
competition.
I didn't even know he had beef for 50. The
Oh,
hell?
so the thing was 50 Cent was putting out an album. I don't even know what it was called because it doesn't matter. But basically 50 Cent said that if Kanye outsold him when their albums dropped, I think on the same day, he would quit making music. And so he was getting people very hyped up, kind of creating a little bit of like a commercial war there. And Kanye ended up outselling him, but he stayed in the game anyway. But I always thought this was a really interesting kind of moment in hip hop because it definitely marked a transition between what had been popular the last few years, which I like kind of see 50 Cent as like the front runner of, and then the new style of hip hop that began evolving after 2007, led by Kanye predominantly. And so this
That's
album
fair.
to me
That's
feels
fair.
like a really big transition in music.
I never thought of it that way of thinking of that beef kind of as a microcosm of rap as a whole. But you do actually make a really good point because 50 Cent is so much the like, I'm the bad boy rapper. I like use guns and stuff. And Kanye came on with College Dropout and said, I'm looking for a way to rhyme without using knives and guns. And yeah, that's a really sweet connection one.
Okay, so what do we think of Graduation?
Top best album. This is the
Whoa!
crown jewel. This is this man's magnum opus.
I don't know if he's kidding.
No, this is it. This is the album. This is everything right here.
Okay.
This is fashion. This is sound. This is identity. This is the peak.
God.
This man took me to another dimension with this album.
Wow. What do you like about it specifically?
I mean, the shutter shades, iconic. The man made a fashion statement just with the video stronger, even like the little teddy bear on the front. And I think it's great. It works great artistically because we started out with the College Dropout, late registration, and then the Graduation. And the timing of it, I mean, I don't think he timed it like in the grand scheme of things. But for him to have graduated and then moved on into that big transition in the middle with 808s and Heartbreak and My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, like it makes sense. Like the first 3 albums were just him, training up. And then he leaves out. And then we get, Kanye starts to blossom into the Kanye we know today, for better or for worse. But no, I really enjoyed the production on a lot of the songs. This is kind of like why I like Born Sinner with by J. Cole so much. Because a lot of the production is just otherworldly. And it's really dreamy. And it takes you away from like the present. I don't know if this is a good thing, but it like takes you out of your present. It sounds really spiritual. But you understand what
this
I'm
is definitely
saying.
like, I mean, I think when he starts off Big Brother by saying like stadium status, that I think is a great descriptor. Like I feel like I'm in a stadium full of people and that this is what we're all listening to. And I think there is something very spiritual about that kind of stadium feeling. And so I absolutely agree with you. I think it feels like futuristic or like a heavenly album with its instrumentals and its production. So I totally agree with everything you just said, Milo. I'm also just shocked because I've been trying to figure out what your music taste is, and this just threw another wrench in there. So I appreciate you keeping me on my toes in that way.
Did you think I wouldn't like this one, or I would just kind of be like, oh man?
I thought this would be near your bottom.
Okay.
I did too. So for me, this was probably the first album that I listened to by Kanye all the way through. I was 14 when it came out, and I downloaded it on my iPod. So it holds a really kind of unique, special place in my heart. Looking back in 2020, though, I do feel like for the really high highs it hits, like Good Morning, a great opener, and like Flashing Lights, I think this album hits when we talk about Kanye also having low lows. This, the songs Barry Bonds and Drunken Hot Girls are awful. They are the worst
That was Mark's
song
least favorite.
My
has
God,
put out,
bro.
And
what? Go ahead.
And this is coming from the biggest San Francisco Giants fan you'll meet. I watched Barry Bonds every day growing up, and when I saw a song called Barry Bonds, I lost my mind. But unfortunately, the Lil Wayne feature was just as unlistenable as I find most of Lil Wayne. But
okay, you don't have to do that.
This song also has a lot of my favorites too, with like Good Life, and I said Flashing Lights might be one of my favorite Kanye singles ever. High highs, low lows. I do think Kanye has more consistent albums. Not to say that it doesn't have hits. So now I'll pass it off to Juan.
Yeah, this album, I thought, like, it's one of my favorite Kanye albums. Definitely top 4. I agree with you about Barry Bonds. It's up there with one of his worst songs ever. But I do think Drunken Hot Girls is criminally underrated. And I've never met someone who agrees with me on this. So I understand that I am probably in the wrong. But that song is amazing. It feels like a foreshadowing of what Kanye was going to do on albums like 808s and Heartbreak and a little bit of Yeezus in there. It felt like a rough version. I will give you that, but I still felt that feeling there. Most Def's part was beautiful. I thought Kanye's delivery on the verses was entertaining. I loved it.
Juan, you are the only person I've met to have that opinion. So good on you for having it.
Thank you.
Thinking on your own.
Yeah, Barry Bonds and Drunken Hot Girls were my 2 least favorite off of this. And the thing about Drunken Hot Girls was I just couldn't divorce what he was saying from the sleaziness of targeting drunk women.
That's a very good point.
I couldn't, not think about that, like the Brock Turners and Harvey Weinsteins of the world. I was like, this hasn't aged well.
I agree with that. I think you're very right there.
Actually, just real quick, Milo, I think we had a conversation a few months ago. This might have been what stirred her. It might have been something else. But how, like, around this time, like, 2000s, like mid early 2000s, whatever, getting girls drunk to go sleep with them and party with them or whatever was like a sought out thing or looked after thing, and now we very much consider like no, like that's rape.
Yeah,
like, that's like but like if you listen to music back then, like get her drunk, but like it was so normalized.
Yeah,
sorry,
it definitely was. That's a really good point.
And that is something we should kind of bring up just for people who might not have been listening to Kanye for that long. Rap, along with Kanye, has changed a lot in the past 16 years. And so there are some stuff from the earlier albums that seem kind of a little suspect, but
and the new
albums. I feel like Kanye's done. Yeah. In the newer albums, I think Kanye wants it to seem suspect. But
that's a good point.
But the times have changed, and it speaks to how enduring of an artist Kanye has been for most of at least my lifetime.
All right, I'm gonna give my take on this album.
Oh no!
So
hold on here.
As Milo already knows, this is my least favorite Kanye album by far. This is at the very bottom. The only thing I liked about this was like the artwork. I thought the artwork of the cover was cool, bro. The artwork was dope. But other than that, like, all right, so single Stronger, like it's a cool song, but like it doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't promote any like emotional response. Like, I don't know. It doesn't do it for me. Barry Bonds is one of the worst things I've heard in my life, and I fucking love Lil Wayne. Drunk Hot Girls, once again, horrible. Flashing Lights, it's not that great of a song. I'm sorry. I don't care what you guys keep saying, but it's really not that great of a song. Yeah, and so Good Life is probably, I would say, the best song on here, to be honest. With T-Pain. Also, what the fuck happened to T-Pain, dog? Shit.
He does cosplay now, though.
Really?
Yeah. I saw some cosplay footage of him. Shout out to T-Pain.
Shout out to T-Pain. But yeah, so like, I mean, I just remember, and it was only on one listen, so like I'd have to go back and probably listen to it multiple times to have like a genuine opinion. So don't take what I say with a grain of salt with this album. But this is my least favorite Kanye album.
Flashing Lights is not a great song.
It's not a great song, bro. It's not as cool as people think it is.
It's so cool.
It's really not.
I heard it on the radio like 2 days ago.
Damn.
Yeah. I want to say that Good Morning is his best intro.
I can see that.
It's a great song and it's a great intro. And I think that's a rare thing to do in music generally, that it stands on its own in that way. I think Big Brother is also a really bad song, though.
No, disrespectful. No. That inspired Dog. The whole "No ID My Mentor, Let the Story Begin." That was J. Cole. J. Cole took that.
That part's cool.
On what was it? For Let Nas Down. Come on now, there's artistry here.
I like that line, but it's just a weird song. It like makes me blush with embarrassment when I think about Kanye describing the way that he tried to get Jay-Z to like him so hard and that it never really worked. And then like jump forward to like 2016 when Kanye is having breakdowns on stage talking about why won't you let our kids play together? Like, I just can't listen to that song.
But that is a post-2016 reading, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure, yeah.
I just thought it was a great example of like storytelling. I was actually surprised by, I didn't know Kanye did, like, because it's very structured in the sense that it has a refrain that it always comes back to in order to, cap off each part of the story. And then it ends off the story with the same refrain. I think J. Cole, when he did it, he said, "Let the story end," whereas Kanye didn't. But I don't know, I guess I just fell in love with the structure of the song. Because to be honest, like even the production and rhyming it's not remarkable on that particular track, but it's the way he told me about and took me through this journey from the past.
I thought it was a well-told story. I agree with you there.
That's Mark just doesn't appreciate.
I guess so. I mean, I understand this is like a top album for a lot of people. So I, like you said, wanted like just a bit ago, like for me, for this album, I understand I'm probably in the wrong, but just for me, I can't do this album. That being said, if I had to pick a top 2 songs, I'd pick Good Life. I'm just gonna say Good Life for now. I really don't have a second.
So if I had to choose 2 songs, so I have 2 songs, but they're like both hits. So if we're excluding like all of the ones that were really, really, really well known.
No.
Don't
exclude
pick singles if you want to pick singles. No.
That's not fair. Like you can't choose something that's like a pop hit and be like, yeah.
Yes, you can.
Album.
Your top 2 favorite songs from the whole album.
Okay, well, it would be it'd be Stronger and Champion.
All right.
But as I said, like if it weren't those 2, it would be The Glory and Big Brother.
I'm gonna say Good Morning and Can't Tell Me Nothing.
Nice. And for me, I'm also going to pick Good Morning, but I'm also going to pick Flashing Lights. Apparently, we're not supposed to pick singles, but I think Flashing Lights is the best song from this album.
Totally.
Before we move on, this is probably the lowest one that we've talked about so far on my personal rankings. This is, this is my number 6.
This is my number 9. 9 out of 9.
It's my number 4.
Okay, just real quick before I say what it is, I just want to change my answer. It's not Stronger and Champion. It's Stronger and I Wonder. Sorry. As for, I think I made it pretty clear this is top on the list. Like this is in first place.
And sorry, I was wrong. This wasn't number 9. Actually, I went back and looked at my list. This is 8 out of 9. Sorry. My bad.
I thought you were going to be like, no, it was actually lower. Number 30.
So if I'm correct, which Juan, Alan, Milo, please let me know if I'm not. These 3 albums signify like a period of Kanye, and then after this, I think Milo, you also mentioned this. Like he moves on in a way like does graduate to a new version of himself, right?
I actually think of College Dropout and Late Registration as sort of an era, and then Graduation into 808s as a different era where the first 2 albums Kanye's coming on with a lot of soul sample music he samples like Aretha Franklin and he's sampling like Ray Charles. And so when he talks about making the soul sound, I think of those first 2 albums. And then once we get to Graduation 808s, I think of Kanye as a little bit more of an ambitious producer who's going to be a little more attuned to what most of rap is going to be doing for this album, and then is also going to be expanding his production even more outlandishly on 808s and getting away from the soul sample a little more. But Mark, I do agree that there is a shift coming in Kanye's career, whether you think it is Graduation or you think it is 808s.
Yeah.
The late 2000s definitely were a shift compared to the early 2000s for Kanye.
So I guess let's just take a look at step back and look at this. So this era of Kanye, whether it's just the first 2 albums or 3 albums, like how is this Kanye overall compared to the other iterations we see later for you all?
I'm sad. Are we not talking about who he was as a person?
I mean, include
We're
person
talking about
and music.
musician.
Person and music.
As a musician, I would say no. It was fun. Like he doesn't get worse, but there are some projects after this where I thought the choices were like, what were you thinking? So as a musician and stepping out of his comfort zone, becoming more experimental, good. But as the identity of like Kanye's, like as a person who he was during this era, it's really sad to see him now trying to, exploit Christianity for profit.
But you could argue that's what Jesus Walks is kind of doing that too, right?
Well,
That's a risk.
See, this is the thing. I don't know, because it takes a lot to get on TV and call the president of the it takes a lot to get on TV during a disaster and a disaster relief commercial to take the time to call the president of the United States racist. And that to me is just, it signaled that he actually believed a lot of the stuff he was saying in his earlier album. Whereas now I don't see him going out of his way to, just out of the blue, he comes out with Jesus is King, and now all of a sudden he's changing his life. But it's like, you still live in a mansion. So you just would you skip the whole poverty part of the gospel? Like you just, the abridged version. So what I'm saying basically is I think the Kanye then, the ideals and beliefs he put in his music, that was actually who he was. Whereas now, and it was evidenced by his actions. Whereas now it's just for money.
I feel like, Milo, I agree and I disagree with you at the same time. I agree that this Kanye comes across as a lot more genuine, right? Where he's just going to talk about why are people going to college? People don't actually think about that process and what it's going to bring for them. And so lyrically, he came across more genuinely than MAGA hat Kanye would later do. But I do kind of push back a little bit against like saying it's genuine. It's less genuine because he's living in a mansion now. Because I feel like Kanye was always trying to get into a mansion. He was talking about buying Benzes on College Dropout, and he's talking about like driving slow down the Houston streets, picking up girls on late registration, right? So I feel like Kanye's always been this sort of person who is looking to make money and is looking to have fun. It's hard for me to put my finger on why it does feel different, but there is a little bit of authenticity that I feel like is missing from the earlier work.
I think for me, I think he's always been an inconsistent artist, like in his kind of the ideals he espoused and also the actions he portrayed. I think there's always been a tension there and a contradiction there. The difference now with Jesus is King, kind of looking forward, is that he's no longer acting as if there's a contradiction there. He's acting as if what he wants to do and what he's doing are finally unified. And it just feels completely inauthentic for that reason, because we all know he's a Trump supporter. He's a wealthy person.
All right. So, Alan, you want to introduce 808s?
Well, I was thinking having Juan introduce 808s because it is his favorite, and my favorite album is coming up after this.
Okay. So 808s and Heartbreak, his 4th album. I would say that this is the beginning of a new era for Kanye. This album was seen as very different when it came out because Kanye is mostly singing on this. He's using very strange production, heavy 808s, much more R&B pop feeling than kind of a hip hop album. A lot of people dismissed this as not even hip hop when it came out. If I remember correctly, the album is largely a reflection on both his broken engagement and the passing of his mother, which happened right around the same time and caused Kanye a lot of grief. And this album is a reflection of that grief. It's a much more somber album, and that reflects both in the instrumentation and in the lyrics. Another thing to say is that this album is maybe Kanye's most influential piece of work in the way that it shaped the hip hop landscape. I don't think we'd have artists like Drake today, or any of the kind of what people call mumble rap, the more melodic turn in hip hop, the more emotional turn in music away from seeming hard to expressing emotion. I think all of that started with this album in a lot of ways. And a lot of artists, such as Lil Uzi Vert, would say that themselves.
What year did this come out again?
2008.
Like 2010, 2011?
2008.
2008?
Yeah. Also, I'm reading that this album was recorded in just 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas... Yeah, sounds like it.
Some of his other albums, like I think what I saw was looking on Wikipedia for College Dropout, that was like the songs were like over 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I was actually gonna say, I agree with you, Milo. When I first listened to it, it sounded like he just took like only 2 months to make this album. But yeah, Milo, you want to give us your thoughts on this album overall first?
Bottom of the list, complete trash. So we talked about this on, I think, Nav's album. I'm not a big fan of on the nose, bleeding heart lyrics. It works when emo pop punk bands do it, and I don't know why, but it's not what I'm looking for. And it's not the emotionalness. It's not the emotional. What I'm saying is that I think this was melodramatic.
Mm-hmm.
I like drama, and music is fine. Like, you get drama from Drake. Sometimes he gets a little melodramatic, but this project, to me, the content and the things he was singing about were melodramatic. And I think that because you just get lines like I believe it's the last track, and it sounds like he's at a concert and he's singing to a crowd of people. I don't know if did he record that live, or was that?
It's a freestyle.
Digital? Okay. And he's like on stage, like, "Oh, I want to be a real boy. I want to be a real boy." And I just can't help but cringe at things like that. And I'm sorry, some vocal training is in order. That voice it's not completely bad, but definitely some training is necessary. So trying to listen to him sing, trying to tolerate that, couldn't. And then the things he was singing about, cringe factor was off the charts. And the production, a lot of people like the production on this, but yeah, it was really bad. It sounded like somebody who just was learning how to use FL Studio or whatever, and was using all of like the basic plugins that you get like when you start it up, and just started experimenting with it and making songs. Not my favorite.
I do agree with Juan. This is an album that is incredibly influential. And when I think of rap in the 2010s and I'm thinking about Drake, this album I can see, and this was Juice WRLD's favorite album. So I see just, yeah, this is a massively influential album. But I also do agree with Milo that this is towards the bottom. It's not my personal least favorite, but it is pretty low down there. I feel like songs like RoboCop, I think are really, really, I don't enjoy listening to. And I think the idea is just kind of corny, if I'm being honest. See You in My Nightmares is another one that, yet again, another Lil Wayne feature that I really, really don't like. And Love Lockdown, I'm also not a big fan of. But I also want to say that this album shot up the career of Scott Mescudi, aka Kid Cudi, who would release his first album 2 years later. I think I respect a lot more than I want to listen to, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I almost exactly agree with Alan. I think from what I could tell from, like I said, I didn't really listen to this, but a lot of my favorite rappers, like, they claim this as like one of the albums that strongly influenced them. And I listen to a lot of like emo rap and shit, so it makes sense. So I would say this is like probably is his most influential album, incredibly influential. But at the same time, it's very minimalistic, which isn't bad by any means. But from a lot of the big sounds that I heard in like Call This Dropout or even Late Registration, like they weren't here. It was just very stripped down, seeking more of like an emotional, angle to push at. And it's not bad. It's just, it wasn't it wasn't for me. I don't know. Like I understand that he influenced a lot of music I like, but I like the later influences more than this itself. So I'll give it credit. It's probably a dope album for a lot of people, but just the sound, just for whatever reasons, does not work for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love this album so much. And that's okay that none of you like it. I think so it was called Melodramatic, and I completely agree. And as I was trying to formulate my list, it was very difficult for me to decide whether or not I was going to keep it number one because I recognized that I was in ninth grade when this dropped. I was a very depressed child. And this album was the thing that the melodrama of a sad high schooler could latch onto. And so I think it is definitely largely nostalgia that keeps me ranking this album number one, but I can't help but rank it there. I mean, I just generally love autotune. If you were to give me a great vocalist, I would still think they sound better with autotune just because I like the effect that it does on the voice. I like the robotic feel. I like how kind of electronic the instrumentals sound. I like the minimalist feel. It feels like if like an electronic artist did like an MTV Unplugged kind of concert, it would be something like this. Which I just like the kind of like the feeling of that.
That's fair.
I hear what you're saying about the auto tune, but this is the thing, Juan. He didn't even sound good with the auto tune. It was.
I disagree. I thought I love
Autotune's
Kanye's
supposed
voice.
to make you sound good.
I love his singing voice. I think it's gotten better with time, but I think that even though I could understand how objectively he can't sing, he sounds great on this album to me.
One thing I do want to draw attention to, there's a really standout song on this album to me, and that's Streetlights. And I do get, like, Kanye sings a little bit on it, but I don't think it sounds bad at all. Maybe it does to you guys, but to me, I think his melodies can carry it, and it is kind of like a rap and singing hybrid. So, you guys have any thoughts on Streetlights?
I think it's entirely chorus, and so it's very repetitive in that way, which I think adds to the feeling he's describing, kind of like being in a taxi cab as he rides, just looking out his window, seeing the streetlights pass by him and reflecting on life. And I think the music and the repetition and the slowness and the somber reflective feel that everything creates works really well with that. I think it's a very like cinematic song that really puts me in the place that he's trying to put me.
So, people want to pick two favorites?
I have nothing. I'm not even trying to be hyperbolic. I have absolutely no song from this. I mean, I guess objectively you could say Love Lockdown and Heartless because those were like the two biggest ones. But it's not coming from me. That's just coming from the charts.
Milo, I have to say, for someone who accuses this album of being melodramatic, gotta point that out, dog. For me, I mean, ironically, you just said it, but like for me, I'd pick Heartless and Love Lockdown as my two favorites. Not just because they're the big like singles that got hits, but when I listen to the album, those are the two I like most. I probably will have to go back and listen to like RoboCop because I do remember that being pretty great. But yeah, Love Lockdown and Heartless for my two favorites.
For me, it's Love Lockdown and Streetlights.
For me, it is going to be Streetlights and Heartless. Cool. I do again want to say I respect this album a lot. I just think that better albums like Man on the Moon by Kid Cudi we're just coming right around the corner at this time. But I do really, like we've all said, this album is massively influential. And one more quick fact about this album. It was nominated for the NAACP Image Awards, which is funny because on his last album, Graduation, in the song Everything I Am, he says to say goodbye to the NAACP Awards. Like he's making this turn to get away from all these like winning these awards, and then NAACP comes and recognizes him after they get dissed. So
that's funny.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty funny one.
I know he brought in Kid Cudi to help him make this album, and I always wonder how much Kid Cudi actually did for the album. Seeing like things like Man on the Moon, and I feel like this album could not have been done without Kid Cudi.
Yep.
And I think we see how well they work together in things like Kids See Ghosts, which we're not going to cover here, but is also amazing.
Oh my God, but that's a
Mhm.
that's a fucking great album. I'll give that mad credit. But yeah, so for ranking, I'll put mine. Actually, let me look. So this 808s, yeah, this was 7 out of 9 for me. Like I respect it, but it just didn't sound good. Alan, how about you?
Fittingly, 808s is number 8.
Oh, I think I made it clear. It's bottom.
Number 1 for me.
Damn. All right. Cool. Alan, you want to do your favorite album up next?
So this is Alan here. We are talking about Kanye's 2010 album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy.